The Professor and the Madman by Simon Winchester. I have a little bit out of the middle here I want to read. Not the middle, actually, page 25. Just going to read you a couple of pages about the Oxford English Dictionary. I myself have the Oxford English Compact Dictionary, folio version. Quote, "It took more than 70 years to create the 12 tombstone-sized volumes that made up the first edition of what was to become the great Oxford English Dictionary. This heroic, royally dedicated literary masterpiece, which was first called the New English Dictionary, but eventually became the Oxford Ditto, and thenceforward was known familiarly by its initials as the OED, was completed in 1928. It's a big run-on sentence. This heroic, royally dedicated literary masterpiece was completed in 1928. Over the following years, there were 5 supplements. Then, half a century later, a second edition that integrated the first and all subsequent supplementary volumes into one 20-volume whole. The book remains, in all senses, a truly monumental work, and with every little serious argument, is still regarded as a paragon, the most definitive of all guides to the language, that for good or ill has become the lingua franca of the civilized modern world. Just as English is a very large complex language, so the OED is a large complex book. It defines well over 500,000 words. It contains scores of millions of characters and, at least in its early versions, many miles of hand-set type. Its enormous and enormously heavy volumes are bound in dark blue cloth. Printers and designers and bookbinders worldwide see it as an apotheosis of their art, a handsome, elegant creation that looks and feels more than amply suited to its lexical thoroughness and accuracy. The OED's guiding principle, the one that has set it apart from most other dictionaries, is its rigorous dependence on gathering quotations from published or otherwise recorded uses of English and using them to illustrate the use of the sense of every single word in the language. The reason behind this unusual, tremendously labor-intensive style of editing and compiling was both bold and simple. By gathering and publishing selected quotes, the dictionary could demonstrate the full range of characteristics of each and every word with a very great degree of precision. So they go back to the first published version of a word, and they will actually mention that in the reference. They will be like Milton, or whoever, so-and-so 1410, such and such 1760, and so on. And they actually give historical quotations, and they'll give a couple of them sometimes if the word has evolved. Here's how we used in the early 1600s, then the late 1700s, then in the 1900s, or whatever, Historical approach. Very good way of doing it, and it's made the thing an authority all around the globe. Continuing. Quotations could show exactly how a word had been employed over the centuries, how it has undergone subtle changes, shades of meaning, or spelling, or pronunciation. And perhaps most important of all, how and more exactly when each word slipped into the language in the first place. No other means of dictionary compilation could do such a thing. Only by finding and showing examples could the full range of a word's past possibilities be explored. The aims of those who began the project back in the 1850s were bold and laudable, but there were distinct commercial disadvantages to their methods. It took an immense amount of time to construct a dictionary on this basis. It was too time-consuming to keep up with the evolution of the language it sought to catalog. The work that finally resulted was uncommonly vast and needed to be kept updated with almost equally vast additions. And it remains to this day, for all of these reasons, a hugely expensive book both to produce and to buy. But, withal, it is widely accepted that the OED has a value far beyond its price. It remains in print, and it still sells well. It is the unrivaled cornerstone of any good library, an essential work for any reference collection, and it is still cited as a matter of course. the OED says. In parliaments, courtrooms, schools, and lecture halls, in every corner of the English-speaking world, and probably in countless others beyond. It wears its status with a magisterial self-assurance, not least by giving its 500,000 definitions a robustly Victorian certitude of tone. Now I just pause to say, it was an epic undertaking. So they said commercial disadvantages there. I think if a business corporation were formed that were going to take this method, that it would do something like come out with 6,000 or 8,000 words for each letter, 10,000 for S maybe, and 170 words for Z or whatever. And it would come out with a first version, 40,000 words. 40,000 word version of the new definition by historical precedent. Then they would just expand that, add to each one, instead of doing every single word they could think of or find in the letter A. And then every single word they could think of or find in the letter B. It's no wonder it took them 78 years or more. But continuing, the robustly Victorian certitude of tone, some call the language of the dictionary old-fashioned, high-flown, even arrogant. Note well, they say by way of example, how infuriatingly prissy the compilers remain when dealing with even so modest an oath as bloody. Though the modern editors place the original NED definition between quotation marks, it is a word now constantly in the mouths of the lowest classes, but by respectable people considered a horrid word, on par with obscene or profane language, and usually printed in the newspapers and police reports as B dash 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 Y. That's from the OED. Even the modern definition is too lamely self-regarding for most. Here it is, the modern definition. There is no ground for the notion that bloody, offensive as from association it now is to ears polite, contains any profane allusion. Continuing, end quote of the definition. It is those with ears polite, one supposes, who see in the dictionary something quite different. They worship it as a last bastion of cultured Englishness, a final echo of value from the greatest of all modern empires. Then it talks about this modern group who have come about, and they are talking about the sexism and racism in the OED. There are many such critics, and with the book being such a large, immobile target, there will no doubt be many more. And yet most of those who come to use it, no matter how doctrinally critical they may be of its shortcomings, seem duly and inevitably in the end to admire it as a work of literature, as well as to marvel at its lexicographical scholarship. It is a book that inspires real, lasting affection. It's an awe-inspiring work, the most important reference book ever made. And given the unending importance of the English language, probably the most important that is ever likely to be made. Now that was page 25 to 27, 25, 26, and 27. And it's the most explicitly on-subject bit in the book so far. There are the earlier pages, and then the pages coming after that, just to go back to the story about the professor and the madman. Interesting book, though. Fantastic book. Good read. Have to recommend it.